Hello and welcome to Politics 101, Political Ideologies. My name is Francine Banner and I will be your lecturer for this course. I just finished my PhD in Justice Studies at ASU and I also have a law degree from New York University. My dissertation research focused on Chechen women's engagement in political violence against the Russian Federation. I'll be happy to share with you any information about my dissertation research, as well as to answer any questions you might have about going to law school or pursuing graduate work, if you want to send me an email. This week we launch into Ball and Dagger, Chapters 1 and part of Chapter 2, answering questions such as what is an ideology, and looking at issues such as what is freedom and what is democracy. Here's my information should you need to get a hold of me during the course. So what's an ideology? Basically, an ideology is a set of ideas that links our thoughts to our actions. According to Ball and Dagger, to be an ideology, a concept must be first explanatory. It needs to explain why it is that something is as it is. It must be evaluative. Ideologies give us all standards for looking at the social conditions around us and evaluating them. It must be orientative. Ideologies provide group members with a source of identity. Ideologies also are programmatic. They prescribe what followers should do in certain situations, and sometimes what they should do in the course of their lives. The authors warn us to be careful. Not all ideas are ideologies, and I add here, not all isms are ideologies. For example, I note that veganism is probably an ideology. Veganism is a concept that seeks to explain why people today have come to eat animal products. Veganism provides standards that one can follow in order to decide what to eat, and sometimes how to live one's life. Vegans might develop a certain identity around being vegan by choosing their mode of transportation, their mode of dress, even the music they listen to, according to the ideals of the vegan movement. Veganism also attempts to provide guidelines for what people should do in certain situations. In contrast, terrorism is an ism, but is not an ideology. It's a means to an end, a tool perhaps. Although terrorism may provide some people with a certain identity, it certainly does not explain the world around us, and it does not serve an evaluative function, helping us to evaluate that world. The authors point out that democracy is an ideal, the goal of many ideologies, but is not in and of itself an ideology. Similarly, nationalism and anarchism may comprise many different ideologies, but the authors argue that these are not ideologies in and of themselves. For now, take a look at what these terms, nationalism, anarchism, and democracy, mean according to the authors. We'll return to these ideas many points in the semester. Ideology, importantly, is not the same as scientific theory. Why? Because it is not empirical, but it is normative. In other words, an ideology doesn't describe something that is, but instead it seeks to tell us how things should be. In other words, political ideologies are all about assessing human potential. There are two elements to this. The first element is who are we? What is our human nature? Each ideology will have a very different conception of human nature. Are people generally warlike and competitive, or do they tend to be generous and cooperative? Vegans, for example, believe not only that the world would be a better place if people were to stop eating animals, but just as importantly, that we all have the capacity not to eat meat, that it is in our human nature to eat vegetables only. Islamists, likewise, believe differently about our human nature. They believe our human nature is to live a religiously observant life without alcohol, pornography, or R-rated movies. Each ideology also offers different ideas about freedom. We see on bumper stickers all of the time the concept, freedom isn't free. What does this really mean? Each of us, I gather, probably has different ideas about what freedom means to us. The authors tell us freedom is not universal. What freedom is also going to be a contested concept across cultures, across ideologies, and even between individual people. McCallum says every conception of freedom will contain three components. First an agent, then the goal, and then a barrier or obstacle to achieving that goal. These will differ based on ideology. Here I offer a few examples of how different ideologies might conceive of their visions of freedom. You'll see the agents differ in each ideology. In some cases it may be a person, in some an animal, in some a religious group, in some a class of people. The goals are all very different of these social movements, and the barriers and obstacles that they will confront will be quite different as well. In each module of the class, we'll return to these important questions of what is human nature and what is freedom, according to the particular theorist we're studying. Chapter 2 introduces us to another heavily contested concept and a popular goal of many ideologies we'll be focusing on this semester, that of democracy. As you saw in the YouTube clip assigned for this week, in 1987, President Reagan stood at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin and instructed Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev to tear down the Berlin Wall, signaling the fall of communism. This was done in the name of democracy. In the years before this, post-World War II in the mid-40s until the late 80s, global politics viewed much of the world as primarily divided up between two ideologies, that of communism and that of capitalism. In this slide, we see the Cold War world of the 80s. Since the 80s and the fall of the Soviet Union, post-Soviet states increasingly began to call themselves democratic. Some of the hallmarks of these democracies include free elections. They're also marked by the spread of capitalism, growth of women's rights, and end of the one-party system. Now we can see in this slide that the vast majority of nations in the world call themselves democracies. Although, when we look at whether these states really are free, based on categories such as population growth, amount of capital available per citizen, political rights, and civil liberties, the world map looks very different. For example, on this map, nonprofit organization Freedom House looked at a number of factors to determine if the nations in the world were in fact free, not free, or partly free, regardless of how they identified themselves. When they looked at factors such as, are the head of government and national legislators elected through free and fair elections? Are the laws fair? Do people have the right to be part of different political parties? Do minorities, such as women or ethnic minorities, have full political rights? And is there an independent media? Many of the nations that identified as democratic were in fact not democratic at all, at least according to the standards we'd look at in the United States. One of these, the Democratic Republic of Congo, I show you in the next slide. Just for example, the Democratic Republic of the Congo identifies itself as a democracy in its documents and in the title of its name. However, this nation has endured war for more than 10 years. There are mass rapes of women and children, with more than 3,500 women having been raped so far in 2009 alone. The government leadership is corrupt. Child soldiering is rampant. More than 11,000 people have been disappeared in conflicts, and more than 1 million are recorded dead. Nonetheless, this country calls itself very boldly a democracy. One of the vital things this demonstrates to us is that democracy is not a universal term. It's contested and it's open to debate. The book tells us that the contested nature of the term democracy isn't new. It can even be traced to its origins. In Greek, the word democracy means rule by the common people, demos people, and kratein to rule. However, as we'll see in next week's slides, Athenian democracy was by no means completely free and democratic. I thank you for listening to me this week, and I look forward to speaking with you in week 2.